Mina Yilmaz's hands trembled as she organized the stack of papers on her desk. 3 weeks in Istanbul, and the city still overwhelmed her with its relentless pace. The gleaming office tower of Global Vantage Enterprises stood in stark contrast to the humble village in Anatolia where she had grown up. At 18, she had left everything behind: her family, her childhood friends, and the predictable rhythm of small-town life for the promise of independence in the sprawling metropolis. Mina. The quarterly reports need to be filed by noon. Where are they? Mr. Demir's voice boomed across the office floor. Coming right away, sir, she replied, her voice barely audible over the constant ringing of phones and the hum of conversation. She hurried to deliver the reports. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen, causing her to double over. It wasn't the first time she had felt it this week, but it was certainly the most intense. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she steadied herself against the wall. Are you okay? Zeynep, a fellow assistant who had taken Mina under her wing, approached, with concern in her eyes. I think so, Mina managed, but another wave of pain contradicted her words. You need to see a doctor, Zeynep insisted, helping Mina back to her desk. There's a clinic nearby, Harmony Fertility Center. They have general gynecologists too, and they don't make you wait forever like the public hospitals. Mina hesitated. Without health insurance and with barely enough money to cover her rent, medical expenses weren't something she had budgeted for, but the pain was becoming unbearable. Go now, Zeynep urged, taking the reports from Mina's hands. I'll handle Demir. Your health comes first. 40 minutes later, Mina sat in the plush waiting room of Harmony Fertility Center. The clinic exuded wealth and professionalism, a far cry from the rural doctor's office she was accustomed to. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and the receptionists wore crisp uniforms that looked more expensive than Mina's entire wardrobe. First time here? A middle-aged woman with immaculately styled hair smiled at Mina from across the waiting area. Yes, Mina replied, self-consciously smoothing down her modest dress. Dr. Aydin is wonderful. Very discreet, very professional. All the elite families of Istanbul come here, the woman continued, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Even international clients. I heard the Al-Farsi family. You know, the oil billionaires from the Gulf. They've been trying for a baby for years. They're patients here too. Mina nodded politely, though the names meant nothing to her. In her village, wealth was measured in acres of land and head of livestock, not in oil reserves and corporate holdings. Mina Yilmaz, a nurse called, and Mina rose, following her down a hallway lined with framed certifications and awards. An examination room, Dr. Aydin, a compassionate woman in her 50s, listened carefully as Mina described her symptoms. Let's run some tests to rule out anything serious, she said, patting Mina's hand reassuringly. It might just be stress from your big move to the city, but it's better to be certain. Meanwhile, in an office down the hall, Emir Kartal stared at his computer screen in desperation. As the clinic's records manager, he had made a critical error, one that could cost him his job. He had accidentally deleted the treatment records for Mrs. Layla Al-Farsi, wife of one of the most powerful men in the Middle East. Her artificial insemination procedure had been cancelled at the last minute, but Emir had failed to update the system. Mr. Al-Farsi was known for his ruthlessness in business and his insistence on perfection. If he discovered the administrative error, he would ensure that everyone involved paid dearly. Emir's hands shook as he contemplated his options. He could admit his mistake and face immediate termination, or he could find a way to cover it up. His eyes fell on the intake form for the new patient, a young woman from Anatolia. No family in Istanbul, no connections, no power. An idea began to form in his mind, terrible but tempting. He glanced around to ensure no one was watching, then began typing rapidly, swapping records and altering schedules. By the time Mina was led to another room for what she believed was an ultrasound, Emir had completed his deception. The nurse handed her a paper gown. The doctor will be with you shortly for your procedure, she said with a reassuring smile. Procedure? Mina asked, confused. I thought I was just having tests. Yes, of course, the nurse replied smoothly. The doctor will explain everything. Unbeknownst to Mina, the tests she was about to undergo were actually the artificial insemination procedure scheduled for Mrs. Al-Farsi using the preserved sperm of Ibrahim Al-Farsi, collected years ago before he underwent cancer treatment. Dr. Aiden entered the room, accompanied by a younger Dr. Mina hadn't met. "This is Dr. Nazli, our fertility specialist," Dr. Aiden explained. "She'll be assisting with your examination today." Mina nodded, too intimidated by the clinical environment to question why a fertility specialist was needed for what she assumed was a routine checkup. "Just relax," Dr. Nazli told her as she prepared the equipment. "This won't take long." In his office, Ibrahim Al-Farsi ended a business call and checked his watch. His wife should have completed her procedure at the clinic by now. After years of failed attempts and heartbreak, they had decided to try one last time with the sperm he had frozen before his illness. He picked up his phone to call her, unaware that she had cancelled the appointment days ago during one of their increasingly frequent arguments. As Mina dressed after the procedure, feeling only mild discomfort and confusion about the unexpected complexity of her examination, she was handed a prescription for vitamins and told to return in 2 weeks for follow-up tests. "Everything looks good," Dr. Nazli assured her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just take these vitamins daily and avoid strenuous activity for the next few days." Mina paid the fee, wincing at the cost but relieved it wasn't higher, and headed back to work, unaware that her life had just been irrevocably altered. The pain that had brought her to the clinic had faded, replaced by a mild soreness she attributed to the examination. As she walked through the bustling streets of Istanbul, the city felt even more overwhelming than before. Skyscrapers loomed above, her like sentinels, and the endless stream of cars and people moved with purpose and direction she couldn't yet fathom. She was a small-town girl trying to find her place in this vast urban landscape, unaware that she now carried within her a secret that would soon shatter the carefully constructed worlds of everyone involved. 3 weeks after her visit to Harmony Fertility Center, Mina stood in the tiny bathroom of her studio apartment, staring at her reflection in disbelief. The constant nausea that had plagued her for days had evolved into morning sickness that left her dizzy and weak. Her body, once familiar, now felt like a stranger's. "This can't be happening," she whispered, pressing her palm against her still flat stomach. "It's impossible." As a traditional young woman from rural Anatolia, Mina had never been intimate with anyone. Her upbringing had emphasized virtue and restraint, values she had never questioned. Yet here she was, experiencing symptoms that pointed to one unthinkable conclusion. With trembling hands, she dialed Zeynep's number. "I need to go back to that clinic," she said, her voice barely steady. "Something's wrong." 2 hours later, Mina sat across from Dr. Aiden, whose face had drained of color as she reviewed the results of Mina's blood test. "This is unexpected," the doctor said, choosing her words carefully. "Ms. Yilmaz, you're pregnant." The room seemed to tilt around Mina. "That's not possible," she insisted. "There must be a mistake." Dr. Aiden's expression grew even more troubled. "The test is conclusive, and according to the ultrasound," when she hesitated, "you're carrying twins." The world went silent around Mina as she tried to process the impossible news. Twins, pregnancy, without ever having been with a man. How? She finally managed to ask, her voice barely audible. Dr. Aiden exchanged a glance with the clinic director, who had been hastily summoned to the room. "We're investigating that question ourselves," she said, her professional demeanor cracking. "Slightly. I need you to remain calm while we look into this." But calm was beyond Mina's reach. As the reality of her situation crashed over her, tears began to stream down her face. "I can't be pregnant. I can't be." In another part of the clinic, chaos had erupted. Emir Kartal had disappeared. His desk cleared out overnight after a routine audit had flagged inconsistencies in patient records. The clinic's administration was in turmoil as they pieced together what had happened. "Call the Al-Farsis immediately," the clinic director instructed his assistant, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. and pray that Ibrahim Al-Farsi is in a merciful mood. Across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the Bosphorus, Layla Al-Farsi stared at her phone in confusion. What do you mean, procedure completed? I cancelled it weeks ago. The clinic representative on the other end of the line fell silent for a moment. Mrs. Al-Farsi, we urgently need to speak with you and your husband in person. A situation has developed that requires your immediate attention. What situation? Layla demanded, a sense of dread building within her. Please, it's better discussed in person. Can you come to the clinic today? An hour later, Ibrahim and Layla Al-Farsi sat in the clinic director's office, their expressions growing increasingly thunderous as the full extent of the catastrophe was explained to them. You're telling me, Ibrahim said, his voice dangerously quiet, that a young woman I've never met is now carrying my biological children because of your incompetence? The clinic director nodded miserably. The employee responsible has been terminated and will face legal consequences. We're doing everything Everything, Ibrahim cut him off, rising to his full height. You've created a scandal that could destroy everything I've built. My reputation, my marriage, my legacy, all at risk because you can't manage your staff properly. Layla remained silent, her elegant features frozen in shock. After years of failed fertility treatments and disappointments, the idea that their woman, a stranger, was carrying what should have been her children was too painful to process. Where is she now? Ibrahim demanded. She's still here, in with Dr. Aden, the director replied. She's understandably distraught. I want a DNA test immediately, Ibrahim said, and I want this handled with absolute discretion. If one word of this reaches the press... He left the threat unfinished. Meanwhile, Mina sat numbly as Dr. Aden attempted to explain what they believed had happened, a mix-up in procedures, an unauthorized insemination. This is unforgivable, the doctor said, genuine anguish in her voice. The clinic will cover all your medical expenses, of course, and compensate you for this error. Compensate me, Mina repeated, the word hollow in her ears. I'm carrying someone else's babies. How do you compensate for that? Before Dr. Aden could respond, there was a knock at the door. The clinic director entered, his face grave. Ms. Yilmaz, there are some people who would like to speak with you, he said, the biological father of the babies and his wife. Mina felt her heart race. Until that moment, she hadn't even considered the existence of the man whose children she was carrying, a stranger whose DNA now intertwined with her destiny. Ibrahim and Layla Al-Farsi entered the room, and Mina immediately felt diminished by their presence. Ibrahim, tall and imposing in an immaculately tailored suit, surveyed her with calculating eyes. Layla, draped in designer clothing and subtle yet expensive jewelry, could barely look at her. Ms. Yilmaz, Ibrahim began without preamble. I understand you're as much a victim in this situation as we are. Mina nodded mutely, overwhelmed by the surreal nature of the conversation. We need to discuss how to proceed, he continued. This pregnancy is the result of a terrible mistake, but the children you're carrying are genetically mine. Layla finally spoke, her voice brittle. They should be mine. We've been trying for years. The implication hung in the air between them, an expectation that Mina would simply hand over the babies once they were born, as if returning misdelivered packages. I don't know what to do, Mina admitted, her voice small but steady. I never asked for this. No one is suggesting you did, Ibrahim said, his tone softening slightly. But we need to find a solution that works for everyone involved. The clinic has lawyers preparing documents, the director interjected. A confidentiality agreement and perhaps a surrogacy contract retroactively. Surrogacy? Mina echoed, the foreign concept adding another layer to her confusion. It would mean you carry the babies to term and then transfer custody to Mr. and Mrs. Al-Farsi, Dr. Aden explained gently. The clinic would ensure you receive appropriate compensation and the best medical care. Mina looked from the doctor to the Al-Farsis and back again, feeling like a pawn in a game whose rules she didn't understand. These were powerful people accustomed to getting their way, discussing her future and the future of the babies inside her, as if she had no say in the matter. "I need time to think," she said finally, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "This is all happening too fast." Ibrahim nodded stiffly. "Of course, but understand that time is a luxury none of us has in this situation. The longer we take to resolve this, the greater the risk of exposure." As if summoned by his words, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside. The door burst open, and a young man with a press badge dangling from his neck managed to snap several photos before security dragged him away. "Who was that?" Layla gasped. The clinic director's face went ashen. "A reporter. Someone must have tipped him off." Ibrahim's expression darkened to thunderous. "Find out who talked," he ordered the director, "and contain this, now." But it was already too late. By that evening, social media was buzzing with speculation, and by the next morning the first headlines appeared. "Virgin pregnancy scandal at elite Istanbul clinic," and "Billionaire's sperm given to wrong woman." Mina returned to her apartment to find journalists already camped outside her building. Her phone rang constantly with calls from unknown numbers, reporters seeking the exclusive story of the virgin mother of the billionaire's babies. Inside her tiny studio, she sank onto her bed, hands protectively covering her stomach. 3 weeks ago, she had been an anonymous young woman struggling to adapt to city life. Now she was at the center of a scandal that was growing by the hour, carrying twins that connected her to one of the most powerful men in the Middle East. As darkness fell over Istanbul, Mina made a decision. She couldn't stay in her apartment, couldn't face the reporters or the whispers from neighbors. Packing a small bag with essentials, she slipped out through the service entrance and disappeared into the night, seeking sanctuary from the storm that had become her life. The small hotel on the outskirts of Istanbul was a far cry from the comfort of Mina's apartment, but it offered something more valuable than luxury: anonymity. For 2 weeks, she had moved from one budget accommodation to another, using cash to avoid leaving a digital trail. Her meager savings were dwindling rapidly, but the alternative, facing the media circus that had erupted around her, was unthinkable. In her current room, with its peeling wallpaper and narrow bed, Mina scrolled through news articles on her phone. The story had exploded beyond anything she could have imagined. International tabloids speculated wildly about the Virgin Mother scandal, with headlines growing more sensational by the day. A knock at the door made her jump. She hadn't ordered room service, and no one knew where she was. Or so she had thought. "Ms. Yilmaz," a male voice called. "My name is Kerem Ozturk. I represent Mr. Al-Farsi. We need to talk." Mina's heart raced. How had they found her? With trembling hands, she opened the door a crack, leaving the security chain engaged. A well-dressed man in his 30s stood in the hallway, his expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Al-Farsi requests your presence at his residence this afternoon," he said. "He believes it's time to discuss your situation directly." "How did you find me?" Mina asked. Kerem's expression didn't change. "Mr. Al-Farsi has resources, Ms. Yilmaz. Finding people is rarely a challenge for him." The implication was clear. There was nowhere she could hide that Ibrahim Al-Farsi couldn't reach her. The realization sent a chill through Mina's body. "I see. Don't want to see him," she said, her voice small but determined. "With respect, Ms. Yilmaz, this isn't a request you can decline. A car is waiting downstairs." Kerem's tone remained polite, but the steel beneath his courtesy was unmistakable. 90 minutes later, Mina sat in the opulent living room of Ibrahim Al-Farsi's Istanbul penthouse, feeling hopelessly out of place. Among the marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and priceless art. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled below, the Bosphorus glittering in the afternoon sun. Ibrahim entered alone, his imposing presence filling the room instantly. In his tailored suit and with his commanding demeanor, he embodied wealth and power in a way Mina had never encountered before. "Ms. Yilmaz," he began, taking a seat across from her, "your disappearance has complicated an already difficult situation." Mina raised her chin slightly. "I needed time to think without cameras in my face." "Understandable," Ibrahim conceded, "but hiding won't solve our problem. The story is out and speculation is rampant. We need to take control of the narrative. Our problem? Mina repeated. You talk as if we're business partners. I didn't ask for any of this. Ibrahim's expression softened fractionally. Neither did I, but here we are, connected by circumstances neither of us chose. He paused, studying her. You're very young. I'm 18, Mina replied defensively. 18 and carrying my children, Ibrahim said, the words hanging heavy between them. I've spent the past 2 weeks trying to understand how to navigate this impossible situation. My lawyers have drawn up several options. He placed a folder on the coffee table between them. The first is a traditional surrogacy agreement. You would receive financial compensation, the best medical care, and complete privacy for the remainder of your pregnancy. After delivery, you would transfer full custody to me and my wife. Mina stared at the folder without opening it. And if I don't agree? Ibrahim's eyes narrowed slightly. The alternative would be considerably more complicated for everyone involved. The threat was veiled but present, a reminder of the power imbalance between them. Mina felt a flutter in her stomach, as if the babies themselves were responding to the tension in the room. I never planned to be a mother yet, she said slowly, especially not like this. But these babies are growing inside me. I can feel them. They're part of me now, even if I didn't choose this. They're my biological children, Ibrahim countered, his voice hardening, created from my genetic material, which was stolen and misused. They're inside my body, Mina responded, surprising herself with her boldness. I didn't steal anything from you. For a moment, Ibrahim looked taken aback by her defiance. He had expected a frightened young woman eager to escape the mess she'd found herself in, not someone willing to assert herself against his authority. Before he could respond, the elevator doors opened, and Layla Al-Farsi entered the room. Unlike their meeting at the clinic, where shock had rendered her nearly mute, today she radiated cold fury. So this is the girl, she said, eyeing Mina with undisguised contempt. The one carrying what should have been my children. Mina flinched at the hostility in her voice. Layla, Ibrahim warned, we agreed to approach this calmly. Calmly? Layla laughed, the sound brittle. While this girl threatens everything we've worked for? The press is calling it a miracle pregnancy, Ibrahim. Your business rivals are delighting in the scandal. Our friends are whispering behind our backs. She turned her attention back to Mina. Do you know how many years I've tried to have a child? How many procedures, how many disappointments? And now you, a nobody from nowhere, are carrying twins that should be growing inside me. I didn't ask for this, Mina repeated, tears welling in her eyes despite her determination to remain strong. Neither did I, Layla snapped, but here we are, and I will not let you destroy my family or use these babies to extort us. Ibrahim rose, placing a restraining hand on his wife's arm. That's enough, Layla. Ms. Yilmaz is a victim in this situation too. Layla shook off his hand. Don't be naive. She's been hiding for 2 weeks, letting speculation run wild, probably planning how to maximize her payout. That's not true, Mina protested. I was scared. I still am. You should be, Layla said coldly, because if you think you can use this situation to your advantage, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Ibrahim stepped between them. This isn't helping. Layla, please give us a moment. With a final withering glance at Mina, Layla stalked from the room, leaving behind a silence heavy with tension. Ibrahim sighed deeply. I apologize for my wife. This situation has been challenging for her. For years, all she's wanted is a child. Something in his tone made Mina look at him more closely. And you? What do you want? The question seemed to catch Ibrahim off guard. For a moment, the powerful businessman facade slipped, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath. I want what's best for my children, he said finally. I want them to have every advantage, every opportunity. I want them protected from scandal and speculation. Even if that means taking them from their mother, Mina asked quietly. Ibrahim's expression hardened again. You're not their mother, Ms. Yilmaz. You're a victim of circumstance, as are they. But make no mistake, those are my sons or daughters you're carrying, and I will do whatever is necessary to secure their future. Before Mina could respond, Ibrahim's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowning. "Excuse me. I need to take this." As he stepped away to answer the call, Mina's gaze fell on a family photograph on a side table. Ibrahim and Layla, both smiling, though Mina noticed that Layla's smile didn't reach her eyes. They looked perfect together, two beautiful, wealthy people accustomed to having the world bend to their will. Ibrahim returned, his expression grim. "That was my security team. The press has somehow learned you're here. There are photographers gathering outside the building." Mina felt panic rising within her. "How?" "I was careful. In this digital age, privacy is an illusion," Ibrahim said, moving to the window to look down at the street below. "Someone in the hotel must have recognized you, or perhaps someone followed Karem when he came to collect you." He turned back to her, his decision made. "You'll stay here tonight. It's not safe for you to leave with the media swarming outside. Tomorrow we'll discuss our next steps." "Stay here," Mina echoed, alarmed at the prospect of spending the night under the same roof as Layla Al-Farsi. "The penthouse has 5 bedrooms. You'll have complete privacy," Ibrahim assured her, "and perhaps the time will give us both a chance to consider our options more carefully." As if sensing her hesitation, he added, "I give you my word, Ms. Yilmaz, that while you're in my home, you and the babies will be safe. Whatever our disagreements, we both want what's best for these innocent lives." Something in his voice, a sincerity she hadn't heard before, made Mina nod in acceptance. As a staff member showed her to a guest suite larger than her entire apartment, she wondered if she had just made a terrible mistake or taken the first step toward an unexpected resolution. What neither Mina nor Ibrahim knew was that Layla had already set a plan in motion, one that would change everything. In her determination to claim the babies as her own, she had contacted a prominent psychiatrist known for his willingness to provide diagnoses that suited his wealthy clients' needs. By morning, she would have medical documentation suggesting that Mina was mentally unstable and unfit to make decisions about the pregnancy or the baby's future. Meanwhile, across the city, a breaking development was unfolding. The missing clinic employee Emir Kartal had been apprehended at the border while attempting to flee the country. Under interrogation, he was beginning to reveal the full extent of his deception and the surprising role Layla Al-Farsi had played in the aftermath of his mistake. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the guest suite, rousing Mina from a fitful sleep. For a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar luxury surrounding her, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. She was in Ibrahim Al-Farsi's penthouse, pregnant with his twins, caught in a web of circumstances beyond her control. A soft knock at the door preceded the entrance of a uniformed maid carrying a breakfast tray. "Mr. Al-Farsi requests your presence in the study at 10 o'clock, Ms. Yilmaz," she said, setting down the tray. "He said you might appreciate some time to prepare yourself." Alone again, Mina picked at the elaborate breakfast, her appetite diminished by anxiety about the coming meeting. Would Ibrahim present her with an ultimatum? Would Layla be there, radiating hostility and resentment? At precisely 10, Mina made her way to the study, a richly appointed room lined with leather-bound books and dominated by an antique desk. Ibrahim sat behind it, reviewing documents with such intense focus that he didn't immediately notice her arrival. Without his attention on her, Mina took the opportunity to study him, the strong profile, the slight grey at his temples, the confident set of his shoulders. This was the father of her babies, a stranger whose DNA now linked them irrevocably. "Miss Yilmaz," Ibrahim said, looking up at last, "please, sit down." His tone was different today, less commanding, more thoughtful. As Mina took the seat across from him, she noticed the dark circles under his eyes. He looked as if he hadn't slept. "There have been developments overnight that change our situation significantly," he began, pushing a newspaper across the desk toward her. The headline made Mina gasp. "Fertility clinic scandal. Employee confesses to record tampering. Emir Kartal was apprehended trying to leave the country," Ibrahim explained. "He's confessed to deliberately switching your records with those of my wife after making a series of critical errors. Apparently, he was facing termination, and thought he could cover up his mistakes. Mina scanned the article, her heart racing. "I don't know what to say," Mina admitted, the document blurring through her tears. "This is so different from what I expected." "Different from what I expected of myself as well," Ibrahim confessed. "But sometimes life forces us to reconsider who we really are." For the first time since this ordeal began, Mina felt hope, not just for her babies, but for herself. "The press will still want their scandal," she pointed out. "They won't leave us alone." "Let me worry about the press," Ibrahim said with confidence. "What's important now is that you have proper care for the remainder of your pregnancy. I've arranged for the best obstetrical team in Turkey to oversee your health and the baby's development." Ozan cleared his throat. "There's one more matter to address," he said. "The clinic has agreed to a substantial settlement in exchange for avoiding criminal charges. The funds have been placed in a trust for the children." "Justice of a sort," Ibrahim commented, "though no amount of money can truly compensate for what was done." "What about Layla?" Mina asked hesitantly. "Will she contest this arrangement?" Ibrahim's expression hardened. "As part of our separation agreement, Layla has relinquished any claim to the children. In exchange for her discretion and cooperation, she's received a generous financial settlement." What Ibrahim didn't share was the evidence he had uncovered during the night, documentation showing that Layla had attempted to bribe a psychiatrist to declare Mina mentally unstable. That betrayal, coming after the revelation of her earlier deception, had been the final breaking point in their marriage. "Then, what happens now?" Mina asked. Ibrahim came around the desk and, to her surprise, knelt beside her chair to be at eye level with her. "Now, we try to build something positive from this chaos, not for ourselves, but for these innocent slaves who deserve better than to be born into conflict and resentment." For the first time, he tentatively placed a hand on her stomach. The babies chose that moment to kick vigorously, as if acknowledging their father's presence. "They're strong," he said with wonder, a genuine smile transforming his face. "Like their father," Mina replied softly. 4 months later, in a private hospital suite filled with flowers, Mina gave birth to twin boys with their father's dark eyes and her delicate features. Ibrahim was by her side throughout the delivery, holding her hand and encouraging her with a tenderness that would have seemed impossible during their first contentious meetings. As she held one son while Ibrahim cradled the other, Mina marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a medical travesty had evolved into something neither of them could have imagined. Not quite a traditional family, but a partnership founded on mutual respect and the love they both felt for their sons. "Have you decided on names?" the nurse asked, clipboard in hand. Mina looked to Ibrahim, who nodded encouragingly. They had discussed this at length during the final months of her pregnancy. "This is Aaron," she said, looking down at the baby in her arms, "and his brother is Kemal." "Strong names," Ibrahim approved. "Names that honor your heritage and link them to the land of their birth." In the weeks that followed, they established a new normal. Ibrahim had purchased a comfortable home for Mina and the twins in a secure, private community and divided his time between his business responsibilities and his sons. His transformation from ruthless businessman to devoted father surprised everyone who knew him, everyone except Mina, who had glimpsed the man beneath the power and wealth during those crucial days when they had decided to face their future together. One evening, as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset with the sleeping twins nearby, Ibrahim took Mina's hand. "I never thanked you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For showing me what truly matters. Before all this happened, I measured success in acquisitions and profit margins. Now," he gazed at his sleeping sons, "now I understand that legacy isn't about what you build, but who you help to grow." Mina squeezed his hand. "We've both changed." Indeed she had. The timid village girl who had arrived in Istanbul less than a year ago had been replaced by a confident young woman who had stood her ground against one of the most powerful men in the Middle East, and in doing so, had earned his respect and, gradually, his affection. "What do you think the future holds for us?" she asked, voicing the question that had lingered unspoken between them for weeks. Ibrahim considered carefully before answering. I don't know precisely what shape our relationship will take, Mina, but I do know that we're bound together by more than just legal documents or shared DNA. We've created something unique, a family formed not by convention, but by choice. Every day we choose to put our sons first, to work together despite the unlikely circumstances that brought us here. He looked at her with warmth that had grown steadily over the months they had known each other. Perhaps that's enough for now, to take each day as it comes and to remain open to possibilities we never imagined before. Mina nodded, understanding that some journeys can't be planned or predicted. Their story had begun with a terrible mistake, but where it would lead was still being written, by them together. He says he claims Mrs. Al-Farsi knew about the mix-up soon after it happened, but chose not to reveal the truth immediately. Ibrahim's expression darkened. Yes, that was unexpected news to me as well. The implication hung in the air between them. Layla had known before anyone else that Mina was carrying Ibrahim's babies and had withheld that information, perhaps hoping to use the situation to her advantage. Where is Mrs. Al-Farsi now? Mina asked cautiously. She left for Paris early this morning, Ibrahim replied, his voice carefully neutral. We agreed it would be best for her to distance herself from the situation while we determine our next steps. The door to the study opened and Kerem entered, accompanied by a distinguished-looking man carrying a briefcase. Ms. Yilmaz, this is Ozan Erdem, my attorney, Ibrahim said. He's been working through the night to understand our legal options in light of these new developments. Ozan nodded respectfully to Mina. The situation is unprecedented in Turkish law, he explained. But Mr. Kartal's confession changes things substantially. It establishes that you were subjected to a medical procedure without consent, making you unquestionably the victim in this case. What does that mean practically? Mina asked. It means, Ibrahim interjected, that no court would support removing the children from your custody against your will, regardless of the genetic connection to me. Mina felt a wave of relief wash over her. The babies fluttered within her, as if responding to her emotional state. However, Ozan continued, there is also the matter of paternal rights. Mr. Al-Farsi is, without question, the biological father of your children. I've been considering our options, Ibrahim said, his voice softer than Mina had ever heard it. Last night, after learning of my wife's involvement, I spent hours thinking about what truly matters to me. He rose from his desk and moved to the window, gazing out at the Istanbul skyline. I've built an empire, Ms. Yilmaz. I control corporations across 3 continents. I have more wealth than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But at what cost? The vulnerability in his voice surprised Mina. This was a different Ibrahim from the commanding businessman she had met previously. My marriage has been more business arrangement than love for years, he continued. Layla wanted the status of being my wife. I wanted the appearance of a perfect family life. We both pretended that having a child would fix what was broken between us. He turned back to face Mina. And then you came into the picture, carrying the children that should have been ours, and everything changed. What are you saying? Mina asked, uncertain where this was leading. Ibrahim returned to his desk and opened a different folder. I'm proposing a new arrangement, one that acknowledges the reality of our situation. He slid the document across to her. This establishes joint custody of the twins. You would be their primary caregiver, but I would have regular visitation rights and input on major decisions regarding their upbringing. It also provides financial security for you and the children for life, without strings or control mechanisms. Mina stared at the document in shock. You're not trying to take them away from me? No, Ibrahim said firmly. Those weeks you were in hiding gave me time to reflect. What kind of father would I be if I began my relationship with my children by traumatizing their mother? What would that teach them about power and compassion? Tears welled in Mina's eyes. Of all the scenarios she had imagined, this one had never occurred to her. Ibrahim Al-Farsi accepting her as the mother of his children, offering partnership instead of domination. 1 year after the birth of the twins, Mina sat in the garden of her home, watching Ibrahim play with their sons on the lush lawn. Eren and Kamal, now walking with the determined wobble of toddlers, squealed with delight as their father pretended to chase them. The scandal that had once dominated headlines had gradually faded from public memory, replaced by newer, more sensational stories. The privacy that Ibrahim had promised her had been delivered, their family protected by both legal agreements and his considerable influence. Layla had settled in Paris, reinventing herself as a fashion entrepreneur and rarely mentioned in connection with her former husband. The fertility clinic had been sold and rebranded, its reputation slowly rebuilding under new management. And Mina and Ibrahim had found their way to something neither had expected, a deep and abiding love that had grown naturally from mutual respect and shared purpose. 6 months earlier, in a private ceremony attended only by close friends and family, they had married, formalizing the bond that had formed between them. "What are you thinking about?" Ibrahim asked, joining her on the bench as the twins' nanny took over supervision. "About how life can change completely in an instant," Mina replied, leaning into his embrace. "About how the things we think are disasters can sometimes lead us exactly where we need to be." Ibrahim kissed her forehead gently. "I was so certain I knew what I wanted," he confessed. "So convinced that my path was set, and then a medical error changed everything and gave me the greatest gifts of my life." As the sun began to set over Istanbul, casting golden light across the garden where their sons played, Mina reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a frightened village girl to a confident woman and mother, from a clinical error to a family bound by love rather than convention. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It had begun in confusion and conflict, navigated through scandal and betrayal. But it had led them to a place of genuine happiness and shared purpose that neither could have imagined when their paths first crossed. Sometimes, Mina thought, looking at her husband and their beautiful sons, the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most extraordinary destinations. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope you've been captivated by Mina and Ibrahim's unexpected journey from scandal to genuine connection. For more emotionally rich stories that explore life's surprising twists, we've created a special playlist that you can find by clicking to your left. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique narratives that explore the complexity of human relationships and the unexpected paths to happiness. What would you have done in Mina's situation? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't miss our upcoming content. Each story is crafted to surprise, move, and inspire you just like this one.